Hello and welcome to ARK, the complete series. Well, today we're over in the desert biome because we want to make our gachas more productive. We want to get more loot out of them. We want to get better loot out of the crystals that they produce. And that's why we're out here. Because at the moment we're basically just feeding them stone. I mean, we're getting pretty good loot from them, like journeymen and so on. But it seems that they prefer structures. Now, if you've seen one of the previous episodes, we actually tamed them up using structures. And it seems that if you actually feed them structures, or rather you put structures into their inventory, well, they'll give you better loot in return. But the question is, well, what structures do you want to give them? Turns out, well, it's actually structures you can get from the seeds down there, incidentally. Yeah. It's the Y species plant. Apparently they produce traps, and the gachas love them. So, that's why we're out in the desert here. So we are over at 75, 80-ish. So that's right over there, and right about the eastern sort of like area of the desert biome. Now, the thing is, if I harvest these by hand, I'm not going to get diddly squat. I've tried it, and it doesn't work. So, I've actually brought over a herbivore that can actually harvest them. So, this should be Arthur here. Just double check. Oh, yep, this is Arthur. He's come all the way over from the island, believe it or not. We've had him right since the start, but he can actually get the seeds from this lot here. So, it doesn't really matter, you know, which one you use. I mean, I know some people have using like things like Therizinosaurus, for instance, but I've just been using Arthur these two. So, if you look here, he's got 53 already, which is just like, oh no, Arthur, you didn't want to destroy them. Yeah, that's the downside. You've actually got to use his secondary attack, otherwise it just destroys them. And he just basically gobbles them up, but he's having a field day. Now, actually, having said that, if you go a bit further down, there's actually some down here as well, as far as I recall. Yeah, there's some more of them down there, but that area there, actually got tons of them. I mean, it's way more than we need, because what we're going to actually do is we're going to take these seeds, we're going to put them into our crop plots, and we're going to grow our own traps, basically, and then we're going to feed them to our gachas. I thought I heard back music there. But no, that's the plan. Next is we've now got to go and grow all this lot. So, see you in a while. Well, back at base here, we've been growing some of these plant species Y. Now, it turns out that they'll only grow in large crop plots, which for me means the actual square crop plots we've got. We've got some triangular ones down here, but they won't accept the seeds. So what I've done is I've repurposed the one on the left as well, because my original intention was to have an actual greenhouse that was just dedicated to this plant species Y. So instead what I've done is I filled all of the square plots up in the greenhouse on the right, and then I've picked up all of the square plots from the greenhouse on the left, put them back down again, and I've put in these seeds for the plant species Y. All of the vegetables are now growing in the triangle seamless crop plots here, because they'll grow in either large crop plots or medium ones, and they seem to be quite happy to grow out of these triangle ones. So I've been growing quite a lot of this stuff, so I'm just going to leave them to it now as we grow these plant species Y traps. I've also done some shuffling when it comes to the actual gachas. These two are dedicated to quality. Loot in particular. So they were originally around the corner down there, but I want them closer to the greenhouse. So it's a case of I brought these two over to here. The two that produce our metal are up there now. And the thing to do now is to start running our tests, because I want to find out, you know, what is it I should be using if I want decent quality loot. I mean, all these other gachas I'm not really fussed, to be honest. I mean, just give them something as long as they'll produce the resources from it. These, on the other hand, I really need to get decent quality loot, so what's the best thing to feed them? So, up to now I've just been feeding them stone, but it's a case of I mean, if you go by the preferred food, I mean, ignoring owl pellets, it's a case of structures, then metal, then stone, then, you know, yada yada yada. But what I'm going to do here is a test of fibre first. I'll give it 1,000 fibre, and I'm only going to do the one. I mean, this one here. She's got the highest crafting skill that I've got so far. So the plan is, I'll give her 1,000 fibre. I'll collect all of the crystals, and then we'll be able to see, what sort of loot we get versus how much resources, even how many crystals we get out of her. Then what I'll do is I'll run another test where I just give her stone. Repeat the process using these Y species plant traps, and I'll repeat it again actually with the war maps, because when Extinction came out, they were the more popular choice. So basically we're going to be testing 2 types of resources and 2 types of structures to see what we get that's best. I'll bring you back to show you the results from that once it's completed. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to then run another test, except this time I'll be feeding her owl pellets as well, just to see, what the difference is of using owl pellets versus not bothering with them. So yeah, I've got quite a few tests to run here. I should have enough of these plant species Y traps now. So once I've done all my testing, I'll bring you back. Okay then, so phase 1 is now done. I've given it fibre, I've given it stone, I've given it plant species Y traps, and I've given it the battle maps. And this is the result, which is kind of interesting, I must admit. So, out of the fibre, you've got only 2 crystals. Now, one thing I forgot is these things, they actually store up a credit. So, you give it a certain amount of a resource, it eats that, and if it's not enough to produce an actual crystal, it stores a credit. So let's say, for example, it takes 1,000 fibre to produce 1 crystal. Well, if I give it 1,500 fibre, it actually it'll produce 1 crystal. Then it stores up a credit of about 500 fibre towards the next crystal. So I should have factored that in, but either way, I had to feed it 1,160 fibre to get 2 crystals, which kind of sucks, to be honest. I mean, fibre is cheap to get, but it's a case of it's very, very time consuming. That's the main thing. It takes a long time for them to eat all this and then produce a crystal. So it's a case of, 1,160 fibre gave us 2 crystals. So fortunately one of them happens to be a named crystal, so let's just have a look and see what we got. So that'll be, some form of loot. As it turns out, it's a bit of riot gear, so it's ramshackle riot gear. Now that'll be a resource, so it got us 19 black pearl. Okay. Now that's so bad. I mean, like I say, fibre is very, very cheap to get. The trouble is, it's just taking so long to produce anything. We're getting very little return for the effort. So for the next phase, I'm not even going to bother with fibre. It's not even worth bothering, quite frankly. So how did we do with stone? Well, stone was kind of similar. The plan was, I just plucked this figure of 1,000 out of the air. I thought that would be reasonable enough, but actually 1,060 stone. So we just have to go slightly above that 1,000 figure. Got us all of these crystals. It got us 16 crystals. So if you can make that comparison, for 1,165 we got 2 gacha crystals. For 1,060 stone we got 16 gacha crystals. So yeah, let's see what we get here. So back into black pearl, more black pearl. So we've got, so far we've got 1 named crystal, because remember, at the end of the day, the important thing is we want these to be producing loot. Okay, so we still only got 1 item of loot. So we've got tons of black pearl, but we only got 1 item of loot. So have a look at the comparison there. We've got 19 black pearl versus 327. So it's a case of, well, I may as well go, if all I'm interested in is the resources itself, then I may as well just keep stuffing its face with stone. So once I kind of figured out from the fiber that, you know, the building up this credit, I started playing it safe. I made sure that I gave it enough to produce a crystal on the last feed. So it was actually using up a stack of 20 with fiber, a stack of 20 with stone. So by that I mean it actually ate 20 stone each time. Now it then got quite interesting, I must admit, with the plant species Y, because it then started eating in stacks of 10. So you get these actually produced in, you actually do stack in stacks of 10. Stone stacks in much higher, so does fibre and so on. But interesting enough, we were down to needing only, you know, a stack of 10 of these plant species Y traps for it to feed on. So I thought that was quite interesting, but this is what we got. I only gave it 200 of these because I was literally getting a crystal for every stack of 10. So yeah, I mean, I gave it 200, and this is getting me all of these crystals. So yeah, 20. We've got 20 crystals there. So we've got, let's see what we get out of this one. A comparison. You can see how much more loot we've got now. This is a lot more loot, and that is literally what we're aiming for. These specific gachas, we want them to produce loot. So we've got 7 loot. Just transfer these over to this box here. So we've got 7 loot out of this. We've got 390 black pearl. So you've actually got more black pearl, and we've got way more loot just by feeding it 200 of these plant species Y traps. And it's only eating them at the rate of 10. So that's a massive difference. So I then went over to the actual battle maps, because they were quite popular when Extinction came out. So how do they compare? I did the same sort of thing where I only fed it 200, because this time round it was eating them in stacks of 20. So for every 20 battle maps, it was producing 1 crystal. So let's see what this is like. So that's interesting. We've got 230 black pearl and two loot items of loot. So you look at this in comparison and you think that's a heck of a difference. We're doing way much better by having these plant species Y traps. I mean, I've got quite a lot of them. I mean, just out of curiosity. I mean, I've got this whole system automated, so I'm just going to have a look at my gardener, for instance. This is all of them that she's picked up so far. I mean, I've got quite a few of them growing over there, I must admit. But if you think that each one of these stacks is going to get me 1 crystal, and a lot of those are going to end up producing loot, it's kind of a done deal when you think about it. It's like, if my interest is loot, I really should be just giving them this. I mean, there's just nothing compares. I mean, 2 items of loot for 200, you know, of these battle maps. These battle maps, the trouble with these is it takes so long to produce. I'm the only one who can make them. I can't just go to, say, like a smithy, for instance, and say, oh, give me 200 battle maps. I've got to make them myself. They're very cheap to actually make, but look at the weight of them as well. A stack of 100 weighs 400. So I can only carry so many as well. So it's a case of I've got to spend a long time making them and then storing them somewhere. I mean, you know, the plant species Y traps, I admit, they've got a spoil timer on them. But, you know, just by having these 2 greenhouses, I've produced quite a lot of them, I must admit. And if my only interest in producing loot is from these 2, then these are the only 2 I need to give them to. All the rest I can just keep giving them stone or whatever. It doesn't really matter. I mean, if I end up with like tons and tons of... hello, what's going on over there? I'm just having a look over here because this is looking a bit weird. Oh dear, looks as though these have been breeding. I forgot. Never mind. Yeah, so it looks as though I can just focus my plant species Y traps on these, and then we're done basically. I mean, give the rest of these probably stone, because we're getting quite a lot of resources, at least out of stone. I mean, that's quite a lot. That's quite a lot, like for, you know, just 1,000 stone. Well, roughly. It was 1,060, but it's still a lot of like resources just for a short period of time. Because, you know, Dipsy over there, she's getting me about 4,000 stone every trip. So the question now is, how does this all stack up when we start using owl pellets? So I'm not going to bother with using, you know, the fibre. I'm not going to bother with using, well, I suppose I could do it. I think I'll still do the stone, the plant species wide traps, as well as the battle maps, because I've still got quite a few battle maps in here anyway. I may as well use them. We'll have a bit of a comparison to see how does she do when we give her owl pellets as well. So, see her well. Well, we've now run our second set of tests, and I must admit the results are quite surprising actually. We've done a lot better than I thought by giving these things owl pellets. So, we haven't done anything with the fibre. I just didn't see any point we were getting hardly anything for fibre. So we've done 1,000 stone, and now we've actually got 20 crystals out of that. Now that's just a slight improvement. We were getting about 16, I think, in the original test, where we didn't give this any owl pellets. But we've got... So we've got 4 of those contain loot. So I'll just transfer these over and have a look and see what these are like. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not too surprised. I mean, you can get things like Journeyman, sometimes you get Mastercraft, but we've definitely got a lot more Black Pearl out of this, for one thing. So that's some benefit, I suppose, to giving your gachas. If you're going to feed them stone and you give them the pellets, at least you're going to get more resources. The only trouble is, if you're focused on resources, you don't particularly want the loot anyway. At least in my case, and that's why I've got like dedicated gachas who are just going to focus on loot. I want gachas like those ones just focused on the actual one. Yeah, just focused on the actual production of resources. Now, over here it's... Well, this was like a real surprise, I must admit, because these are the Y traps. Now, here we've actually doubled the actual output with these, because we've now got... Well, it tells you there we've got 40 crystals. So, out of 200 of these Y traps that we gave the gacha, we've ended up with 40 crystals versus the original, which was 20. So it's much more productive, this. I mean, we've ended up with 15 out of those 40 actually contain loot, so that's a heck of a lot better. So we'll have a look and see what we've got out of these ones, because resource wise we'll end up like tons of resources there. We'll just spam this. I mean, it's probably got the point where I can't carry it all. Again, I mean, you know, pretty much Journeyman, Mastercraft sort of thing, so that's pretty good. Especially if, like, you're just starting off. I mean, you get quite a lot, I've noticed you get quite a lot of things like bows, sniper rifles, flak armor, chitin armor, and so on. Shotguns, yeah, pretty good stuff. But again, lots of resources. One thing to bear in mind, though, is this gacha here, she's only at 186, so we're a long way off, you know, for pushing her up to like 260. To be honest, I doubt very much I'll ever get to 260 with her. I don't think it's possible. Hence why we're still doing the breeding. But anywho, over here, we've now got the actual maps. So, out of these, we've got 21 maps versus the original 10 that we got when we didn't give them owl pellets. So, we'll just transfer these across and we'll have a look and see what we get out of these. So, it'll be an interesting comparison in terms of the loot quality, if nothing else. Yeah, pretty much the same. You know, you get mixtures of sort of like, sometimes you can get up to like the Journeyman, sometimes even as high as the Mastercraft. But to me, we're doing way better with these plant species Y traps, and that seems to be the way to go, especially if you're interested in getting loot. It's a case of we want a lot of loot and we want high quality loot. I mean, the good thing is, I mean, even these things that we've got in here, yeah, I mean, none of this is particularly useful for me. If you're just getting started in Extinction, this is ideal. I mean, if you're just starting the map from scratch and, you know, you've got a completely new character, all you've got to do is somehow find your way over to here and tame up some of these gachas, then you can start getting yourself some decent weapons and decent armor. It's not a particularly dangerous area, I must admit. I mean, yeah, there's raptors out here and Therazinos, for instance, but usually it's pretty quiet. But for someone like me, I mean, I've gone through the whole series so far, and you know, we started off at the island, and now we're all the way up to Extinction. So this sort of gear isn't particularly useful to me. But I can put all of this lot into the grinder, and I can get some seriously good resources. So let's just grab a few of these things and we'll see what we can get out of them. Because you'll see in a minute, this is the reason why I don't see any point in doing the gacha that can produce organic polymer, because we're just going to get absolutely tons of organic polymer. Now, I must admit it does spoil, but either way it's a case of you end up with tons of it, so it's just a case of grinding this stuff up in the grinder, and you'll have fun. So I mean, I've got some other bits and bobs still left over, so just dump that in there. I'll just double check there's nothing in there that I don't want to keep. No, grind it all. So yeah, I mean, look at all that organic polymer that we've got there. We've got a lot of metal as well. We've got a lot of cementing paste and good crystal in there, and I mean that's ideal for me, because it just saves me going out and gathering resources, more or less, because I'm now at the point where I can just grow those plant species Y traps, you know, using the plants over there, feed them to the gachas, and I mean, I'm either going to get some decent resources like black pearl or metal. Once the other one that I've got that does dust comes out, I'll transfer her over instead. So instead of the black pearl, I'll be getting her to produce dust. But it's a case of, yeah, I'm going to get like tons of resources, and as these get better, they'll be producing more actual loot and better quality loot. I mean, to be fair, I mean, most of the stuff I get, it tends to be like journeyman or mastercraft, but I have actually gotten a couple of ascendant items. I'll just show you those, because I've put those to one side. Yeah, we actually got this ascendant metal hatchet. Now it's 201, so it's not as good as the one I've already got, which is 218, but it's not too far off. And I've also got this sickle here, which is 204, which, yeah, it's not as good as the 315, but either way, I got that off a gacha. So, again, if you're just starting out, I mean, this is just brilliant. I mean, up to now, I mean, I've just mostly been feeding them stone, so those actually came from all of these gachas that we've got out there. I was just feeding them stone, but if we give them, you know, well, these two especially, if we give them the plant species Y traps, we'll end up with more quality loot. Better quality loot as well, so plus tons of resources, so it's like a no-brainer. Well, one thing I'll point out though is these two gachas, they're standing on what's called an S+ gacha gavager, but I didn't use them during the test. They're just standing on them at the moment, so these things are not active. They're not interfering with the test at all, because they can have an influence on the loot that you get, I must admit. So I've just left them as if they were just standing around on the ground, basically, because we're not at that point. I mean, that's the next step I'm going to, is like full automation. Well, at least as close as I can get. But yeah, I'm quite impressed with those results. I mean, we're getting like double, just by giving the owl pellets, we're getting double the amount of crystals, better quality crystals probably. But it's a case of, it's so easy to get a hold of those plant species Y seeds, and then just grow them. And then once you fully automate this, or at least 90% of it anyway, it's just so much easier. So yeah, plant species Y traps it is. So where do we go from here then? Well, I mean, you can see I've already got these S+ gacha gavagers built. I think we could do with some more, and I think we could get on with this automation a lot more and make things a lot easier. That's all for another episode.